Before there was David Clayton-Thomas, Grammy Award winner, member of several Halls of Fame, songwriter, author, and father, there was David Henry Thomsett. His family moved from England to Canada when David was 3. He grew up in Willowdale, Ontario, a northern suburb of Toronto, with a loving mother and a tough, abusive father.
I think my mother was proud of me from day one. I don't think my father was ever proud of me till the day he died. I was an embarrassment to him. One thing I came out of a brutal childhood with is the determination that my daughter would never be raised that way. And I have never raised a hand to my daughter in her entire life. She's totally unafraid of me. She's completely unintimidated by me. And she'll get in my face and she'll argue with me. And you know what? That's a good thing. You didn't argue with my father. You lost teeth if you argued with my father.
David was in and out of trouble for most of his teens. He spent years in various reformatories and prisons. He occupied much of that time learning to play guitar and singing the blues.
I think I saw music as a way out. And that's the one thing that 99% of people in the reformatories, believe it or not, they're not all bad people in jail. Yeah, there are tough, hardened convicts, but it's just a lot of lost kids too. I wasn't going to go that direction, and music gave me an out.
With his love of music, David Thomsett left prison a changed man, so it only seemed natural to change his name as well.
And so when I got out, I couldn't wait to get rid of the Thomsett name because it had a 5-year prison record attached to it. I started out with Sonny Thomas. But then there was another folk singer around the village of Greenwich Village, Yorkville Village, called Sonny Thomas. And he was a big black guy, about 6'6", and he came to me one afternoon, had a talk with me, and said, "You can't use that name, that's my name." Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, you can be Sonny. I'll be Dave Thomas. If you remember, way back then, there was a weatherman in Buffalo, New York. His name was Dave Thomas. So I was being confused with the weatherman all the time. And then I started seeing all these blues singers with 3 names. There was Lightning Sam Hopkins, John Lee Hooker. So I just came up with David Clayton-Thomas, and I didn't mean it to be hyphenated. Then I got a gig at the Zanzibar, and they hyphenated my name on the Zanzibar marquee. And I thought, well, all right, sure, that's who I'll be then.
Along with just about every other musician in Toronto in the 1960s, David worked with Ronnie Hawkins for a time. Then he took a suburban rhythm and blues garage band and transformed them into David Clayton-Thomas and the fabulous Shays.
I was a huge fan of the Mississippi Delta blues style. It's great jailhouse music. All you need is an acoustic guitar. It doesn't even have to have 6 strings, and you can play that music. I brought that kind of music to the Shays, and it gave it a real rough, Memphis-y kind of edge.
Playing music in Toronto bars in the early 1960s was tough, but David Clayton-Thomas was tougher.
The rock music world wasn't used to a guy who was coming fresh out of Burwash. And if you're coming out of 4 years in Burwash, you're no pussy, okay? You've learned how to handle yourself, and you also carry a big reservoir of rage and paranoia. It took me years to get over, if I ever really truly did. And of course, I came into the music world, which is completely the other side of that coin. It's a very intellectual, more of a gentle place. And I soon learned that there's no place in that world for just decking a guy if you don't like the way he looks at you. But then Yorkville changed everything. In Yorkville was Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and some really wonderful creative people. Your fists didn't get you anywhere up there. And I think that changed my life. It changed my outlook a lot. And I started thinking a little more before I laid somebody out.
In 1964, Toronto disc jockey and record producer Duff Roman signed David to Roman Records, and almost immediately he started racking up hit after hit, the biggest being 1966's Brainwashed, an anti-war song that caused a lot of controversy.
The controversy went right across Canada was that the radio stations were censoring this record. They didn't realize that we censored ourselves. That was in the production on the original record.
60 million people reading all about Vietnam. 85% of them don't give a been brain. Wow, yeah.
People called into their radio stations and it's an infringement on free speech. Let him speak, let him speak.
At the height of his success in Canada, David moved to New York and promptly starved for the next 2 years.
I didn't have an address for the first year I was down there. I would literally 2 or 3 musicians would get together and rent a room for the night. We'd share it, literally. One guy would go and play his gig and then he'd come back and go to sleep and the other guy would go out and play another gig because New York goes 24 hours, you know. And I had a #1 record in Canada. And I was getting a lot of advice from Canada. Come back here, man. You know, you can be comfortable back here. You're not going to make a fortune, but you're not going to starve. And I said, no. This is where it's at. New York is really what's happening. And that's where I wanted to be.
Despite being deported back to Canada on a minor technicality, David was granted a temporary U.S. visa to audition with the group Blood, Sweat and Tears. Original lead singer Al Kooper had left, and David's powerful voice, along with his songwriting abilities, fit perfectly.
Right from the very first song, there were high fives, man. Whoa, what is this? There was no doubt in anybody's mind, this is the band now.
What goes up must come down. Spinning wheel, got to go round. Talking about your troubles, it's the crying sin. Ride a painted pony, let the spinning wheel spin.
David's 1969 debut album with Blood, Sweat and Tears sold 10 million copies. Within a few months, it was #1 everywhere. By the late 1960s, Blood, Sweat and Tears was on top of the world. In August of '69, the group was invited to perform at a 3-day music festival in a small farming community in upstate New York. More than 500,000 music fans flocked to the site that became known as Woodstock. But Blood, Sweat and Tears didn't get to see much of the festival.
They flew us in by National Guard helicopter, we did our set, and we were gone. Less than 2 hours. By the time we got in there on the Sunday night, all semblance of order had disappeared. The fences had been broken down, there was nobody paying for tickets, it was a complete chaos. If the artists had not showed up at Woodstock, there would have been a bloody riot. It wouldn't have been 3 days of peace, love, and flowers. The music kept it peaceful. Well, that and a lot of drugs.
David left Blood, Sweat and Tears in 1972, but returned 3 years later. Since then, he's led various versions of the band, as well as releasing several solo albums. 2010 was a busy year for David Clayton-Thomas. Universal Music released his new CD of Soul Ballads. His autobiography was published by the Penguin Group, and David was honored with a star on Canada's Walk of Fame.
It's interesting the correlation between the book and the Walk of Fame, because one of the things that occurred to me in the writing of the book is that in the early years when I was a young man, the book is all about me. It's all about me, I did this, da-da-da-da-da. And then I notice as you grow older and the book develops chapter by chapter, it becomes more about other people. And I think the Walk of Fame kind of looking out over that audience and seeing my best friend from grade 6 and Duff Roman and these people who have been so important in my life, it's really about these people.
Doug Riley was one of David's closest friends and longtime musical collaborators. Doc, as he was called, is a legend in Canadian music. In fact, it was Doug Riley who first turned David on to jazz. David dedicated his book to Doug, who died of a heart attack in 2007.
It's probably the reason why I hadn't recorded, up until Soul Ballads, had not recorded in 4 years. I totally lost my direction musically without Doc. He was such a strong force in my life musically. Here's a guy that understood me, understood the music, understood where I was coming from. Here's a guy with a doctorate in music And he understood this 3-chord blues that I was playing, and not only understood it, he loved it. He was the baddest boogie-woogie piano player on the planet. Probably the reason why I wrote the book at the time I did was that I was completely directionless musically for that time. So I started writing a book.
So now that he's traveled the world many times, sold tens of millions of albums, and been honored with awards and accolades, what does David Clayton-Thomas plan to do with the rest of his life?
I like to do concerts now that are events. You know, doing like really special jazz and blues festivals and things like that. But just grinding it out on the road, playing spinning wheel night after night in Indian reservation casinos, no, I will not do that. I don't need to, and I won't do that anymore.